What's going on? Welcome in All NFL Monday Huddle as we recap Week 16. Somewhat of a devastating week for all city teams, and certainly, Bo, your Cardinals. That was rough.
It was brutal, man. I mean, to go down to Carolina and have Bryce Young and crew just rip your heart out and just put the final nail in the coffin on the 2024 season. You don't even get set up for a primetime letdown like we're used to around these parts. Didn't even get to that point. So, yeah, big-time loss, big-time devastation, I think, from the fan base. And, I mean, this is just one of those ends to the season that pretty much asks way more questions than you have answers for.
Yeah, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the Cardinals letdown yesterday. We got a lot to talk about. We're festive in our red today, which is fitting because it is Christmas week, and I hope everybody's having a good time out there. And we're gonna we got Christmas games to talk about on a Wednesday coming up here in a couple of days. A quick turnaround for those teams involved. We'll talk about that at the end of the show as well. Adam Hoge in Chicago, Bo Brack in Phoenix, as we recap what went on, and as we like to do, we start with our best and worst of the week. My best is going to involve the Lions-Bears game that I witnessed yesterday, but it's going to be the Lions side of things. And just one of the more fun plays we've seen all season with Ben Johnson calling it the stumble bum is what the play's name is, where Jared Goff faked a stumble. Quarterback sometimes coming out under center, gets stepped on by his lineman, falls down. That happens all the time, right? But he tried to make it look like the ball came loose too. And then to make it even better, Jahmyr Gibbs goes into a dive barrel roll, pops back up ready to block. That's how I knew, Bo, right away that this was a trick play. But it worked. It worked. Deep shot. And scored a touchdown on it. It was amazing. And if you're Ben Johnson possibly interviewing for the Bears job, I mean, great time to pull that play out. Yeah. Before I move on, I wanted to get your reaction to that play, though, because it was just I couldn't believe it. And then you throw in the context we learned afterwards, Bo, that the reason this play got drawn up by Ben Johnson is because in week 1 of last season, 2023, Packers-Bears at Soldier Field, Jordan Love actually did fumble the ball off the snap, and it sucked the Bears defense in enough that he was able to hit his tight end down the left sideline. So they basically just drew up a garbage play that happened before and did it again on the same team, which from the Bears perspective doesn't make you feel any better. It just makes you feel a lot worse.
No, yeah, it is awful feeling to see, like, hey, we're just gonna see if this one works. We're just gonna pull out our whole bag of tricks and see and kind of experiment against our favorite team here. But yeah, hearing Jared Goff kind of go through the process of where they started with this play and where it ended up, and how Ben Johnson was like, "Can you actually fumble the football?" And Goff is like, "I don't think I can do that." And they're workshopping this idea. And that's what they landed on, and how Goff credits Jahmyr Gibbs with his sell job of it. It's just Ben Johnson is a special play caller, man. It's as special as they come. Is it fair to say, like, kind of borderline generational as far as the innovation that we're seeing from Ben Johnson? So, to see that firsthand, obviously it sucks that it's the Bears and they have to be the victim, giving up 6 there and losing another game to Detroit. But, with the reports yesterday, Ben Johnson would, I don't know if he's lukewarm on it, or if he's a big time candidate for the Bears. That's got to be exciting to think that they could couple him with Caleb Williams for years to come, and he could be the guy to help kind of mold the young quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a dream scenario, and in some ways, you screwed it up last January when you didn't let Matt Eberflus go, and you can look at it like you were fortunate that Ben Johnson didn't take a job, didn't take that Commander's job, and is still available because you lost out on Jim Harbaugh, but Ben Johnson's still there for you, and it's just. Here's the problem, Bo. It's the obvious thing for the Bears to do, and they never do the obvious thing. They
Mm,
always do the complicated thing they talk themselves into. So we got plenty of time to talk about that coming up
yeah.
in these weeks to come. But if you're Ben Johnson, you look at the body of work, number 2 offense in EPA per play since he took over back in 2022. So the entire time he's been the OC. That's over the entire stretch. They're number 2
Yeah.
to only Josh Allen's Bills. So you got the numbers behind it, and then you got what you were just talking about, the weekly innovation with this
Mhm.
Lions team. There's something I got a kick out of everyone being like, why'd they waste that play against the Bears? Why didn't they save that for the playoffs? Well, then we learned later exactly why, because they learned it from what the Packers did against the Bears. So you got to run it against the best opponent to run it against. But also,
Right.
like, he has this every week. Again, I mean, it
Right.
might not be this silly or this, crazy, but he's got Penei Sewell rolling
Yeah.
out, trying to throw the ball. There's something every single week with this guy.
Yeah, you got the sixth offensive lineman catching a pass and then taking in for a touchdown. You got
Yeah.
Jared Goff catching passes as well. You got hooks and ladders. I mean, it's the NFL fans' dream offensive coordinator that you get to watch week in and week out. Not often we say that the Lions are blessed with the best the NFL has to offer, but they're certainly witnessing it this week. I'm going to stick in the NFC North as far as my best of the week. Under 4 minutes to play. You've got the Vikings chasing points to the Seattle Seahawks. Two teams, vying for different spots in the playoffs. The Seahawks trying to, hold on for dear life in tight at the top of the NFC West with the Rams. And Sam Darnold throws a 39-yard dot to Justin Jefferson for the go-ahead score in the eventual game-winning score. I thought it was one of the best passes of the year, and Sam Darnold's got a pretty vast resume in 2024 to kind of make that a very tight contest. But Sam Darnold again, coming through in the clutch for the Vikings and putting them up, keeping them in striking distance of the Lions, who I heard the Lions were shouting and hollering in the locker room when the Eagles lost yesterday. But Sam Darnold, 247 and 3 touchdowns, no picks for him. And Justin Jefferson, 10 catches, 144. Like, they're just putting their quarterback and his full array of playmakers on display. Feels like week in and week out, and they're riding it to. We'll see. I mean, there's still some important games to be played in that division.
Yeah, and I was actually driving home from our studio last night listening to my guy Paul Allen, the play-by-play guy for the Vikings, lose his mind over that sequence of events. This Vikings team just it's why a few weeks ago on this show, it's like we just conceded. We got to take this team seriously for Super Bowl contention, and here they are. They're not going away. They still control their own destiny to the 1 seed. Now they got a tough road here. They got to beat Green Bay at home this week. But then if they get that done, they have a chance to go to Detroit in week 18. And that would decide the 1 seed in the NFC, which would be really cool if that's how that plays out. On the flip side, my worst involves that NFC 1 seed. And that is just Devonta Smith dropping what would have been a game-sealing catch against the Commanders, and the Eagles somehow losing a game, which the Commanders turned the ball over 5 times. Now, you put a little asterisk on it because they lost their starting quarterback in Jalen Hurts in this one. We're going to talk to Bo Wulf from PHLY here momentarily. He'll give us the details on that and kind of how this all unfolded. But, Bo, it's crazy to think about this. This Eagles team is now 12-3, and 2 of their losses should be wins, because if Barkley catches that ball way back in week 2 against the Falcons and Devonta Smith catches the ball yesterday, that's the difference between the 2 of their 3 losses right there. Those plays right there, and those are guys you obviously believe in. Devonta Smith catches that ball like 99 times out of 100 yesterday. Kind of crazy, but it did cost them, and the Eagles lost, and their chances of getting the 1 seed not completely dead, but really took a major hit. I think the probability is like only 5% now.
Yeah, it's almost drawn dead there, but it is insane to see a team that has had so much success be able to find these negative moments and then that they are just amplified. And you're seeing like they're just a game behind what Detroit's doing and what Minnesota's doing. And those fan bases are loving life. And then you got Philly who's sitting there with just their third loss of the season trying to pick up the pieces. Like, they just got eliminated like they're the Arizona Cardinals on the road against the Carolina Panthers. But it is strange, but that's the market as well. And we'll get some more insight from our guy, Bull Wulf. I'm going to go with my worst was the Sunday night game with the Bucs in laying an egg against the Dallas Cowboys. While the terrible NFC West or NFC South divisions, they can take a stranglehold on it, and they can't beat the Dallas Cowboys, who were 6-8 and were terrible at home. But Baker Mayfield and crew come in and just can't get it done. And it seemed like their opportunity they were just hanging around for the entire second half. They had a chance to go down there and maybe kick a field goal and win it, but they couldn't get it going. They lose the fumble at the end of the game, and Dallas seals the deal. It's just a brutal loss for the Buccaneers, who now don't control their own destiny. Like the Falcons were able to take care of business against the Giants, and now even with Michael Penix making his first start, like they're in the driver's seat, and the NFC South is now just kind of who knows how that's going to end. But the Bucs were in full control of that. All they had to do was take care of business on the road against the Cowboys and didn't get it done.
You know what's crazy? The Jalen McMillan had a chance to catch that touchdown late in that game. And who took it away on the Cowboys? I don't have it in front of me right now. I'll look it up. The DB that took it away from Jalen McMillan.
Julian Lewis, was that him?
Might have been. I'll double check. Regardless, that play, it was an insane play. Rips it away from him in the end zone. That decided, I didn't make my fantasy football playoffs, but that decided one of our semi matchups in our playoffs. Because if McMillan catches that ball, the other guy would have won, but instead it got ripped out of his arms. Brutal.
You got to see that ball go up, and you see McMillan and running around, and you honestly didn't know until the two players hit the ground. And shortly after that, who came away with that ball. Unbelievable play from the Cowboys, member of their secondary. And you're looking at who, outside of Micah Parsons, who's making plays for them. Some pretty relatively unknowns. You got Nick Visual, who was a fringe roster player here for the Cardinals, and he's got 10 tackles for them to lead the way. You got Cooper Rush continuing to play, decent football for them, throwing for nearly 300 yards. He only finds the end zone once, but Cooper Rush continues to be, it continues to get it done for the Dallas Cowboys. How many, what did they won? 4 or 5? The only loss that they have was a tight loss. A tip of the cap to them, how they're finishing their season. I know Cowboys fans.
The Bengals game was the only one they lost in there. Yeah.
And it's blown coverage against Jamar Chase. And that before that was on just a botched punt return. They blocked the punt. So the Cowboys, it's a really strange end of the season. But, for Mike McCarthy, I know he doesn't get a lot of credit. I have a tough time crediting Mike McCarthy, but his teams continue to play hard and finish strong.
Well, yeah, winning 4 out of 5, and 2 games ago they will play the Eagles this week. By the way, it was Jordan Lewis. My apologies. It was Jordan Lewis who had that awesome interception in the end zone. And we'll talk to Iisha Morrison a little bit later on the show from DLLS to maybe get a little bit more insight on what's going to happen here with Mike McCarthy. But they sure seem to be playing hard from down the stretch, and I know that Jerry Jones had a lot of complimentary things to say about him after the game. But they do go to Philly this week. Good opportunity for us to bring in our guy Bo Wulf, who joins us once again from PHLY to discuss. Bo, what was my worst of the week was Devonta Smith dropping that pass. That was brutal. But then you add into it, obviously, that Jalen Hurts was out early in this game with a concussion. I guess what's the prognosis? What's the long-term impact of that? Have you guys been hearing so far in Philly? And how did Kenny Pickett play in his absence yesterday?
Yeah, so first on Jalen, we don't have any word yet on what his availability might be for this week. Now, it was kind of an odd situation relative to some of the other concussions we've seen, where so he comes off the field and he's trying to tell the ref that he wants to stay on the field, and he does that initial check on the side, and then he wants to come back into the game, and they have to take away his helmet and sort of tell him that he has to go back in. And Zach Berman, who was there at the Commander Stadium yesterday, told us that he's like running into the tunnel because he wants to like really get this done quickly. He wants to get back on the field, and then the Eagles never see him again. And so the perception would be that this would be a relatively minor concussion, but obviously I'm not a doctor. We'll see what happens here. It was interesting that in this game, the Eagles had Sidney Brown and the Commanders had two players, Zach Ertz and somebody else, who both suffered concussions in last week's game and were cleared. So I think the Eagles are holding out hope that there's a chance that Jalen Hurts could come back and play in the next game. And if he doesn't come back and play in the next game, there's a possibility that we don't see him again until the playoffs, because the Eagles might just be locked into the number 2 seed and might not need to play him in Week 18. Although I do think if that is the case, they would probably want to give him, a half or something like that. As for Kenny Pickett, I was not impressed with Kenny Pickett. I think most Eagles fans were not impressed with Kenny Pickett. But the real thing is that the offense itself, after Kenny Pickett threw an early interception, they didn't seem to trust Kenny Pickett. It was like runs on first and second down consistently. And Saquon Barkley, after he had a 68-yard touchdown run, was just getting totally shut down by the Commanders defense. They were selling out to stop the run. And so, yes, like in the end, Kenny Pickett does put the ball on Devontae Smith's hands. And if he just makes that catch that he makes 99 out of 100 times, the Eagles go on and win that game. And we're talking about how they found a way to win without Jalen Hurts. But I think that it's one of those games where I don't think that Eagles fans are super upset about this loss, other than losing the chance to be the number 1 seed, because when you lose your quarterback in the first quarter, it's just one of those weird games. And there's a good chance they're going to see the Commanders again in the first round of the playoffs. And the way that the first quarter of this game went, I think Eagles fans with Jalen Hurts would feel pretty good about the matchup.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I felt like, social media is not real life. But the sense I got, it was fire and brimstone in certain sects of it, as it always is. But to look at this whole, it does suck that they let that opportunity slip through their fingers, especially with it's one Devontae Smith catch away. But to hang as tough as they did, it felt like there was way more positives outside of the final score for this Eagles team than there was, negative. Is that naive of me to say, or is that the sense around there?
It's just, I think it's that if you're thinking about, well, if we actually lost Jalen Hurts, yeah, the team would be in trouble. But this is not the team that they're expecting to have entering the playoffs. I do think that the defense itself was a little bit of a concern. Now, on the one hand, they forced 5 turnovers, which, anytime you force 5 turnovers, obviously you should win the game. And it's only the second time in Nick Sirianni's history in the 4 years as Eagles head coach in which they have lost a game in which they won the turnover battle. And that other one was they only won by 1. This time they won basically by 4, if you don't count the fumble on the very final play of the game. And so when the defense gets that amount of turnovers, the offense should do better and should have done better in this game. However, the defense also gave up more explosive plays in this game than they have since week 1, 4 plays of 25 yards or more. There were a lot of third and fourth down long conversions by the Commanders. A huge play in this game, 4th and 11, when the Eagles were up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And if they stopped them there, the game was probably over. Jaden Daniels scrambles for 29 yards and makes a couple guys miss. So this was it was interesting because it was much different of a defensive performance than we've seen from this defense that has been one of the best in the league, where it has not been usually so boom or bust. It has often been just 3 and out, getting the ball back to the offense that way, not forcing that many turnovers. And in this game, it was sort of all or nothing. They either got the big turnovers or let the Commanders go down the field. It's also one of those games where what preceded the Devontae Smith drop is you think that the defense needs to make 1 stop to win the game, and they get what should have been, the game-winning interception when Darius Slay bats it into the air and Reed Blankenship comes up with the interception, giving the ball back to the offense. You imagine that is they feel on the sidelines like they have done enough to win the game, and then all of a sudden they have to get called on again, and they are not able to do it, obviously, as Jaden Daniels throws the game-winning pass. Also, Eagles' special teams was really bad in this game. Their kickoff coverage was terrible. The Commanders had an average starting field position of just under the 40-yard line on kickoffs. So that's something that you would think is maybe something that could leak into the playoffs rather. But like big picture, I think Eagles fans feel like, okay, if we're not going to get the 1 seed, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world that Jalen Hurts gets a week off. The team can probably rest in week 18 because they're going to be locked into the 2 seed most likely. And so they get their bye that way. It's obviously not ideal to have only 3 losses and not have a chance at the 1 seed. But I think if you take a step back, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Well, and that's where, this game was up against the Bears game. So I was kind of scrambling last night to try to figure out what happened. Because it honestly, Bo, like a lot of it didn't make sense. You bringing up the special teams makes a little bit more sense because I'm trying to figure out, okay, like they took the ball away a ton. Vic Fangio's defense has been great. Like, what happened here that the Commanders were able to put up as many points as they did? And I guess it all makes sense what you're saying, how you're laying this out for the next few weeks, and they're probably going to get a rematch against the Commanders in the playoffs. But is there any concern whatsoever the explosives that they gave up yesterday that maybe Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels figured something out that could be exposed in a playoff game in a few weeks?
Yeah, I think you guys have covered enough games to know that sometimes there just are weird games, and this was sort of one of those games. They gave up these 4 huge plays on defense. One of them came when Darius Slay had been out of the game and was trying to come back into the game from being injured, and all of a sudden the Eagles have 12 men on the field, and so Slay is running off the field, and then they just leave a guy completely uncovered, and he goes in for a long touchdown. Well, I think the actual concern about the defense would be, a running quarterback is a different dynamic and a different variable that you don't deal with on a week-to-week basis. And I think there might be a little bit of a concern that, Jaden Daniels can do some surprising things, some unscouted things in the middle of the game. But I also think if these 2 teams play a third time, I find it hard to believe that the Eagles would be super concerned about that matchup. When Jalen Hurts was in this game for most of the first quarter, like the Eagles were sort of dominating up front on both sides. And the things that the Commanders defense were able to do in this game to stop Saquon Barkley are probably not repeatable because they were just selling out to stop the run. And they wouldn't do that if Jalen Hurts was at quarterback and not Kenny Pickett. And so we'll see what happens moving forward. I mean, the Eagles, in order to clinch the number 2 seed, all they need is 1 win over the final 2 games or a Commanders loss over the final 2 games. So you would expect with the Eagles having the Cowboys next week and then the Giants in week 18, who are probably going to be, tanking on purpose to get the number 1 pick. That is pretty much locked up. And then their chase for the 1 seed is unlikely, but it's not impossible. They need Minnesota to lose to Green Bay next week, Detroit to lose to San Francisco next week, and then Minnesota to beat Detroit in week 18, also assuming that the Eagles win their final 2 games. So I think there is a good chance that they're going to know heading into week 18 that they are the 2 seed and they can rest the guys that they need to rest.
Saquon with 150 on the ground. Now he's got a new career high as far as scrimmage yards, 21-14, 1,838 yards on the ground. Just unbelievable season. Just 160 and some change from hitting 2K, just rushing alone. So how do you view them utilizing Saquon the remaining 2 games?
Yeah, so he needs to break Eric Dickerson's record. He needs 134 yards per game over the final 2 games. So he's like 268 away. But like I said, there's a good chance that they're going to not need to win in week 18. And so my expectation is if they have the 2 seed locked up, they are not going to play Saquon in week 18. I think the offensive linemen have talked about Jordan Mailata, especially like how cool it would be to get to 2,000. And so I think there's a good chance they're going to try to really ride him hard in this next week to get there. But reaching Dickerson is going to probably be dependent on whether or not that final game matters. And I think if you are a right-thinking Eagles fan, you probably don't want to necessarily chase that. It's much more important that they have him healthy for the playoffs. But it's interesting in this game, all of those Saquon rushing yards, he has a 68-yard touchdown run in the first quarter. So many of them came in the first quarter. In the second and third and fourth quarter combined, he had 1 yard per carry, essentially. So the Commanders were able to totally shut him down after the first quarter, which is probably a fair thing to bring up if you're talking about Saquon as an MVP candidate in this game in which we saw what the offense looked like without Jalen Hurts. Saquon was not quite able to make it happen for them by himself on offense.
Yeah, it seems like the MVP conversation has really cooled down here in recent weeks. Is that
it's crazy? I mean, guys going to run for 2,000 yards, but yeah, I mean, and I think it's
crazy.
Josh Allen.
It's crazy that it's cool. You're right. I mean, it's cool. It's like Lamar, Josh Allen, and then here's this guy that's vying for the sacred NFL record. But take a back seat to the quarterbacks, which is usually how it goes.
Yeah. So is that dead? Is that pretty much dead, Bo?
I think MVP wise, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Josh Allen's just has done too much, and it's like a one man show there. But I do think that like if there was a offensive player of the year, I think Saquon's got a good shot for that.
Yeah, which I never really understood. Like
exactly
the difference there, but that's a conversation for a different. I also don't understand comeback player of the year. Like, how is Russell Wilson not the comeback player of the year? He's like his career was dead, and now he's like good again. It makes no sense. But apparently they revised the rules, and so it's more heavy.
It has to be some kind of injury, right? Yeah, he can't just come
towards
back
injury. Well, because of what happened with Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin, nearly died, and he's not comeback player of the year because Joe Flacco was like good for a month. None of it makes sense. I don't know why, as voters, you can't just figure out the difference between some of these things. It seems pretty obvious to me, but whatever. So apparently Russell Wilson's not going to win that award this year, even though his career was over and now he's back. Okay.
Sitting on your couch for a couple weeks is pretty tough compared to nearly dying. I don't know. I mean, it is the criteria how it switches.
Good question. And how about Sam Darnold too?
Yeah.
But Sam Darnold to me that's that good. So what's it? It's maybe he's most improved.
Yeah. Well, now we need that award too. Give me a second. I just know that Russell's not like in the top 4 or 5, but now I'm blanking on who would be the comeback player of the year. So I got to look it up real quick because I know I've seen the odds out there.
See if I can find it.
Yeah. So all right. Well, as we close the book here on the Eagles. Is the loss yesterday, because we know how everybody likes to overreact to things. It seems like you've already answered this question a little bit, but it would seem to be a little bit of a blow to not get the 1 seed. It just felt like it mattered a lot for the Lions. The difference between now going potentially to Detroit in an NFC Championship game versus hosting Lions in Philadelphia, it seemed like a big deal. But overall, it still seems like the Eagles relatively confident about their chances of, nothing drastically changed yesterday, assuming that Jalen Hurts comes back and is healthy.
I think that's right. I think, as you said, and I think as we've talked about before, like the number 1 seed was almost as important for where that game, the NFC Championship game, would be played as it was to get the bye, because of the expectations that the Lions are not quite as good outside. You saw it yesterday, so you tell me if that's true or not. But I think the flip side to that is if you get locked into the 2 and know that you get to rest in week 18, it's not the worst thing in the world, because you're still going to get the rest that you would not have gotten otherwise. And remember, the Eagles had a very early season bye. They had a week 5 bye. So for them to get some time off will be important. The other side to this, though, is I think we're seeing that maybe the depth of the NFC is a little bit scarier than we thought probably a month ago. The Commanders beat the Eagles yesterday. The 6th seed is either going to be the Packers or the Vikings, and those teams obviously could beat anybody. And so maybe the 2 seed is not as guaranteed of a road to the NFC Championship game as we might have thought a few weeks ago. Looks like Joe Burrow is the favorite for NFL comeback player, which is wild. It's like, why? Got hurt? Like, that's fine.
Yeah, he was hurt last year for the second half, and then he got healthy, and then he returned to being Joe Burrow.
This is one of those where he's having a good season. You got to find a way to give him an award, but I don't know. That's weak.
Yeah, I don't. He wasn't even out the whole year.
Again,
okay, whatever.
All odds, Burrow. That's his nickname for me.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to face all that adversity, injury in football, missed some games and came back and is the same guy. Good for him.
That's bizarre.
Can't wait for that speech.
Also on there, J.K. Dobbins, Sam Darnold. I'm seeing Tim Patrick. Yeah, he's had a lot of
why?
injuries.
I'm seeing that too. I'm also seeing DeMar Hamlin.
Okay, well,
Like a
sorry you didn't
do-over.
win it last year. We'll give it to you this year.
Yeah.
It's a weird award. That's fine. By the way, yes, the Lions did not really seem to be bothered by the cold weather yesterday. On the other hand, they were playing the Bears, so might still be hard. I mean, a little bit different, I think, going outside in the playoff game, but they probably won't have to deal with that now because if they don't get the 1 seed, it'll be the Vikings who get it, and they'll just be playing in the Vikings dome. So they're still set up pretty good to have an all indoor run to the Super Bowl.
That's a sneaky rivalry, I think, between the Eagles and the Lions. I might kind of want to see that matchup in the postseason. You know, like you got the Lions and Campbell's holding his presser. You got the team celebrating in the locker room that the Eagles lost. Like they're not going to forget that. And I think that should add a little fuel to that rivalry going into the postseason.
And
by the way, that was wrong what I just said, wasn't it? No, because they could play Atlanta in the first round.
So if they go to the 4, so they were in the first round. If they weren't the 1 seed, they'd have to go play the NFC South. So Atlanta would be inside, but Tampa would be outside. But it's not like it's Florida outside. It's not the same thing,
right? And then it would maybe depend on who they would play in the divisional round. Which
then they go to Minnesota, but and they could go to Philly potentially if that was the case. I was going to say the other thing about the game yesterday, if you're thinking about an Eagles-Commanders rematch in the playoffs, was the game yesterday was very chippy. C.J. Gardner-Johnson got thrown out for 2 personal fouls, both of them just by what he said with his mouth. Like there were no
way. I don't believe you that he was talking.
The first personal foul, he's yapping, and he gets like punched in the face, and his helmet flies off, and he's the one who gets the flag.
He's gone.
So you know that whatever he was saying was just completely out of pocket. The hit on Jalen Hurts that forced the concussion was a little bit dirty. Guys coming in afterwards, Eagles got called for a couple personal fouls. So if these two teams do end up playing for that third time, I think we could expect some potential fireworks.
It'd be a fun game, no doubt about it. Bo, Wulf, appreciate you. Thank you very much. Awesome insight, and seems like more than likely the Eagles will be in that 2 seed, and we'll have a lot to cover here down the stretch here as we go into the playoffs. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bo.
All right, Bo Wulf from PHLY. All right, time to talk about your Cardinals. Brutal game. So Cardinals they're now officially eliminated, for those that might not know, officially eliminated from the playoffs with that loss and some of the other results. Had to win it. If they had won it, they were setting up, a game that the NFL had already put in a window to feature on Saturday. Would it have been the night game Saturday night?
Yeah. It would have been the 3-hole hitter on the triple header. And everything happened to set this game up, this Kyler Murray Mega Redemption Bowl, to go up against the Los Angeles Rams, a team that's kind of plagued him throughout his career, including a brutal wild card playoff loss. That was the year that the Rams made their way to hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. But all the Cardinals had to do was go on the road and take care of old 3-win Carolina. And they came out, got a bunch of penalties. The defense couldn't get off the football field, and Kyler Murray and the offense kind of came out a little bit flat. And then they scratched and clawed their way back into it on the legs of James Conner. Unfortunately, he got injured with a knee injury. We'll hopefully get an update on that soon as far as the latest status on him. I wouldn't imagine it's anything that's going to kind of bleed into next season, but still tough to see him go down after he put up 150 total yards in the first half. But the Cardinals really just had a tough time. Kyler had, for the 5th consecutive game, a very brutal interception. This was, late in the 4th quarter, and the defense did a good job in getting them back in a position to tie the game, and they did, thanks to a Chad Ryland 58-yard field goal. And then the team completely just fumbled its opportunity in overtime. Kyler and this offense, along with 2 missed targets to Marvin Harrison Jr., they just stalled out, went backwards. Another penalty kind of put them back against their backs against the wall in their own end zone on a second punt that they had to make. And Carolina just took it from there. Chuba Hubbard, just the final nail in the coffin. But, Hoge, it's more than just kind of a loss to eliminate themselves from the postseason. It's one of those games where the question is, where do you go from here into the offseason? You got 2 games that really have no meaning for the Cardinals and their fan base. How do you improve this offseason, with really minimal changes expected to the area that kind of lost them post-bye their chance of making the playoffs from the quarterback position and the offense underperforming? It seemed like it's kind of set in place going forward. Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., second-year play caller that I thought there was a confidence going into the season with. And a lot of that, as far as that trio, that confidence is completely gone, and a lot of skepticism that this group can get it right going forward. Like what changes can be made. So it's really going to be fascinating to see like how they navigate the final 2 games and then where they go from there. If they just say, hey, we just need more time, and if they're going to be kind of granted more time from the decision makers, and how the fan base reacts to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at the Cardinals from the outside. You'd say I think this was a step in the right direction. As far as the season goes, you had that stretch where you won 4 games in a row. You won 5 out of 6. But out of the bye week, man, it's been a struggle. 3 straight losses. Beat the bad Patriots, and then lost a game that, I mean, really, the Panthers. I think if this game had been in September, Cardinals would have won it, right? The Panthers, sometimes it's when you play a team. It's not who you're playing, it's when you play them. And right now, you got to give the Panthers some credit. Bryce Young's been playing a lot better. So this wasn't not an easy game by any means. But if you're a for real team, you can't fall in the hole that the Cardinals fell into yesterday. And then if you manage to crawl out of it, which they did, and you get the opportunity in overtime, you have to take advantage of it. I mean, that's your season on the line right there, and couldn't get it done. So I imagine that it's, despite you sort of zoom out and you're like, okay, this has been a step in the right direction, it's still easy to kind of fall into the feelings of all right, what is still, we can't just rest on our laurels here. We got to right. Talk about some major moves to really become a competitor next year.
I know the organization is not going to put a whole lot of credit or anything as far as the fan base and what they want, but it's going to be interesting to see how it's received when you've got Kyler Murray in place, and I don't really have much doubt that the team is going to move forward with Kyler Murray as their quarterback. But then you look at the underwhelming rookie season from Marvin Harrison Jr., and, as I said, targeted twice in overtime, couldn't win one of the 2 50-50 balls, which really weren't that challenging of catches that would have put them in, at times second, third, and manageable. Where's the confidence that he's going to maybe trend in the right direction, with just an offseason and getting expecting the jump in the second year from a wide receiver, where you really didn't see him finish strong in his rookie campaign, as we usually do see from those players that make those jumps. And then where's the confidence in the play calling? So, beefing up the offensive line interior wise with some draft capital or some cap dollars, which they're going to have. Where's are they adding a complimentary wide receiver to go with MHJ? Maybe add some speed and hopefully open up some things in the passing game, like the downfield passing attack. There's some big time problems there as far as it goes, and I think you can point to all parties, from the quarterback to the play caller to the wide receiver room. It's really unfortunate, and like we talk about how they finish. You look at this as a whole. If the Cardinals drop the next 2 games, they would post bye. They're 6-4 going into the bye, and they would have 1 win post bye, where they go 1-6 to end things. That's not going to breathe confidence in the fan base going into the offseason. And it's really going to be interesting to see, like, who you would expect with a collapse like that. At least the head will roll, but I don't know where they make a move that's really going to make impact on things getting fixed here. So the Cardinals are at a strange crossroads, because I think when you look at them going 4-13 for the previous 2 seasons, and then they potentially go 7-10, say they win one of these next 2 games, they go 8-9. The context to that matters, to where they weren't trending the right direction. It fuels the fire and the narrative that Kyler Murray can't win important games in December. So the Cardinals are really going to have to figure out and critically look at where they fell short post-bye and what decisions they can make that are going to make a significant in the impact that's necessary for them to take the next step. Because Hoge, like you've seen it before, like you can go from, it's easy to improve on a 4-win season, and getting to that next step is fairly easy just because of where you get, draft capital, and usually have cap dollars to spend, and you can improve your roster, and that can get you to this next step. This next season is going to be critical for Jonathan Gannon, GM Monty Ossenfort, and Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr. to prove that, hey, like the progress was progress, but we do have another gear to this, or it's going to tell this fan base that some of the characters involved aren't, going to be part of the future of this franchise's success.
Yeah, I think it's gotta be a bitter end to the season here if they were to lose these last 2 games too. And I was looking at the Lions a couple years ago. The Detroit Lions on October 30th, 2022. They lose to the Miami Dolphins, and at that point had only won 4 games in a season and a half under Dan Campbell. And the record was horrible, but they trying to stick to the process. They're trying to grind away, and they're able to run off a stretch where they went 8-2 down the stretch. Like the switch flipped and they finished strong. They almost made the playoffs that year. And then they get eliminated on the last day before they're playing the Packers that night. And they turn that in their playoff game, and they knock Aaron Rodgers out, and he never plays a game for the Packers ever again. And that was their Super Bowl that year. And they're able to carry that momentum into last season's run where they're almost in the Super Bowl. And now, they're a Super Bowl favorite. So, or at least they're up there among the Super Bowl favorites. That's where, I don't mean to rain on the Cardinals parade right now. I'm not trying to do that. But to your point about finishing the season strong, you feel a lot better that you've built, you've shown some evidence that this thing's going to carry over, and now's our time.
Yeah.
If you finish strong, if you build on that. And it's just, that has not been the way this Cardinal season has gone. And that creates a much different dynamic in the offseason than probably what the Lions had ending their 2022.
Yeah, I mean, they were a team, they were on the rise. Like, as you mentioned, they started that season 1-7, and they finished the season 9-8. As you said, just a tremendous win, getting to knock Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs in his Packers career, kind of moping off the field, him and Randall Cobb. It was like you remember that image, and I feel like they were able to parlay that into another fantastic offseason as they get from Holmes and Dan Campbell, seems like a yearly basis, where it's like the Cardinals are going to need to be able to jumpstart this thing again after the momentum that they had created, the confidence that they have gained over the last couple of weeks. It has waned. And are you going to be able to take, like, it's not, they're definitively not the Texans from last year who stuck in the playoffs and won a game. And like, people are going to point to this offseason as like, hey, and say what you will about Stroud now, but at the time, you're like, I want to go play with CJ Stroud. I want to be a part of what DeMeco Ryans is doing. I want to be a part of what Jordan Love and the Packers are doing. These young up-and-coming teams, where if you go out and end the season on a sour note, that momentum is completely gone. So, yeah, I do think like the next 2 games will be important to kind of show, this team, like what they're made of. And if the kind of the building block parts, show a little bit of pride and can potentially play spoiler to the Rams. And then you have George Kittle talking post-game yesterday for the Niners and saying, we're going to play our asses off going forward, and like really continue to pile on the Niners in this brutal season. It's really going to be important for the Cardinals to notice that they're not playing for the playoffs anymore, but they're playing for jobs, and they're playing for maybe kind of creating regaining a little bit of momentum going into the offseason.
All right, we're gonna talk Cowboys here in a moment, but real quick before we get to Iisha, I want to ask you a quick question here. Could you just quick yes or no's on these? Could you see the Bengals beating the Broncos on Saturday? It's a home
Yes,
game. Yeah.
absolutely.
And if that happens, could you see them on a 4-game winning streak going into Pittsburgh in week 18 and perhaps playing spoiler in the AFC North and winning that game? I'm not saying it's likely, but could you see a scenario in which that happens?
I can see the scenario. I think that offense plays really anywhere. Their defense is terrible. Like, could they get, those miracle, a fluke turnover? Could they just get off the field enough to give Joe Burrow and that offense, a chance to win? I give him a puncher's chance for sure. Maybe even more so.
Because if that plays out, they would just need the Broncos to lose to the Chiefs in week 18, which I'd have to look a little bit closer at what the Chiefs might be playing for that week. But the Colts to lose 1 game.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins to lose 1 game. And the Bengals, can't rule them out yet, could still get into the playoffs. It's not that inconceivable that scenario could play out. I'm not saying it's likely, but it could. And so suddenly, unfortunately for you Cardinals fans out there, to me, the intrigue about the Cardinals-Rams game has shifted to Broncos-Bengals now on the Saturday slate. I know I'm looking forward to that. And the Broncos, of course, had their own misstep in Los Angeles against the Chargers way back on Thursday. It feels like it was a week ago now.
Yeah, and they signed up for that, right? I mean, there was all this giving Sean Payton, credit for creating this long layoff. It's like, no, we'll play Thursday so we can get 10 days off between games. And but they got, beat. They relinquished that lead. Our friends over at DMVR have done such a great job in covering what went wrong and how they shot themselves in the foot in that game, and how it really just does put them in harm's way of losing control, relinquishing what they had, what you felt was a stranglehold on that one of those wild card spots.
All right. Well, we touched a little bit earlier on briefly what the Bucs lost yesterday in Dallas. Now on the Cowboys side of things, we bring in Iisha Morrison from DLLS. Iisha, the Cowboys are hot. Mike McCarthy's coming back. We're talking Super Bowl next year.
Whoa. Pump your brakes, boss. Pump your brakes. Nah, man. It's so crazy because here in Dallas, it is such a mixed bag of emotions about this team figuring some things out towards the end of the year. You obviously know they have been decimated with health this season. You lose your starting quarterback. Who expects for you to win games for real? Unless it's like, one of these crazy backup guys. And the fact that this team has been stringing together some wins and also some kind of impressive, games. Like that Bengals game was close. And I didn't think it shouldn't have been. I didn't think it should have been. So it's weird because you have some people who are like, you messing up your draft capital and it's making them sick. But then you have to sit in the reality of you got 32, 33 free agents. They know that all these coaches are on 1-year deals. They're trying to set themselves up. I mean, they're trying to put themselves together. I mean, you just mentioned earlier just how the Cardinals, like guys are trying to play for some momentum, but also trying to play for, themselves. Tape. So it's just a weird energy here because you got some of the fan base that's like, heck yeah, I don't want to see them lose. And then other people are just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, finish your thought and I'll get to it.
No, yeah. I mean, I think the most impressive part of the game last night, I think the defense has been coming along, but the offense was the more impressive side of things last night. I'm not a super Cooper Rush fan. I'm just not. But he came out there through with anticipation. You can tell that they had a good script coming out. They couldn't get anything going on the ground, which is kind of how they've had success this last, 4 weeks, whatever the case may be. And he just started tossing that thing around. I was confused. I was sitting there like, Cooper? Is that you? Like, so that was shocking to me. And then obviously Mike Zimmer and that defense, it took them a while to get what he was asking of them, I think. But they clearly found some success and also getting guys back as well. So interesting outing from the Cowboys last night, guys.
I feel like we've been saying that for the last couple of weeks. I mean, Hoge and I had talked about it a little bit. You know, they've won 4 or 5, and the Bengals game was very winnable. They have this strange punt that they block, and it unfortunately goes in the Bengals' favor. And then we know, Jamar Chase after that. But who has kind of done the best for themselves during this stretch? Like, we know about the stars, right? I mean, we see that CeeDee Lamb is probably the most quarterback-proof wide receiver in the league, and Cooper Rush has done really well for himself, going to be a free agent this offseason. But who is really kind of taken this opportunity, playing in games that don't mean anything for them, but turn it into something meaningful for those players?
Man, it's a toss up for me. It would have to be between right guard Brock Hoffman and DN Chauncey Golston. Chauncey Golston was an edge, came out of Iowa. Everyone looked at him as kind of like the D-Law replacement, super willing to stop the run, had some upside as a pass rusher. And DQ was like, I'm going to play you at 3-tech. Don't know why, but he did. He played him inside, and you just didn't see him flash. You just didn't see – he had a couple plays, but it wasn't anything special. But this year, under Zimmer's system, him being moved back to edge, he's clearly been one of your best run defenders. 4 sacks on the year, the most in his career. He has made himself some money. If Dorrance Armstrong can go to Washington and get paid, this guy can make some money for himself in the open market too. And then when Brock Hoffman, with the loss of Zach Martin, he got the job taken from him by Cooper Beebe at the center position during training camp. Just didn't seem powerful enough, but took his hand out the dirt, told him to go at right guard. We saw some good things from him, seen some good things from him in the run game, in the temperament, and also has the versatility to play at center. I think that he has possibly earned himself a spot on this team next year, because offensive line depth is hard to come by. And now you have tangible evidence that this guy can go up against NFL level talent and perform.
So, Bo brought this up earlier in the show, and you, I think you used the phrase "crazy backup." Is Cooper Rush one of these crazy backups? So I know you said you're not a super Cooper fan, but here's the question: he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's been with Dallas his entire career. I guess I'm just trying to wonder and figure out what he's playing himself into here. If that's with another team, how much money, or does he have so much value to Dallas as the backup that they're willing to pay him some money to keep him around?
Listen, what makes this weird is Trey Lance, because we have no idea really how the Cowboys view him at this point. I mean, clearly he hasn't gotten the opportunity to play. You're in a year where coaches are on 1-year deals. They're going to do the safe thing. Is what it is. Right. The safest bet is to have Cooper Rush out there. Like, that's fine. So we have no idea what's going to happen with Trey Lance, but with Cooper Rush, I'm of the mindset. Now, don't get me wrong. I might get a little distracted by seeing some of the backup quarterbacks in the NFL that were like names, but now they're just backups, and then being able to come in and you actually thinking like, okay, maybe you can win some games with this guy. But with Cooper Rush, he's just steady, man. He's just steady. He comes in, runs the offense. I think, game manager gets a bad rep, but I think that's what he does. I just think he manages the offense. He's not going to make a lot of checks at the line of scrimmage. He's not going to he's going to try to throw the ball to the other team a couple times, but you might survive. And
the one at the end of the game, the one towards the end of the game yesterday was unbelievable. I mean, that should have been picked off.
For what? But at the same token, I have to give him credit for his improvement as he's been on the field. Because the reality is, it's like backup quarterbacks, they're getting reps in practice and stuff like that. But to have actual game time, you see clearly on film the way he's using his eyes, just the way he's delivering the ball, throwing with anticipation, that he's grown some comfort playing. So maybe that gets him back here. I don't know. I'd be so irritated because I'm like, how can you not upgrade at backup quarterback? But then you look around the league and it's just like, maybe you can't. Maybe this is the best guy for the job. What do you guys think?
I selfishly want the Cardinals to be aggressive and light maybe a fire under Kyler Murray's backside, after kind of falling short the last couple of weeks. I think a guy like Cooper Rush, like, I would never feel, like, hey, let's give him the keys to the offense. Like, this guy can be a French starter. I think you're exactly right. Like, he's the quintessential he's the 2024, 2025 quintessential backup. He's like Colt McCoy. He's a guy that you would trust 3 games, and then anything beyond that, you're probably on borrowed time. But I think that he's a guy that should make some decent money. Like, we've been seeing people kick the tires and have some checking the tread on guys like Andy Dalton. Like, I would much rather have somebody like Cooper Rush get in there, and he's shown the ability to go and run offenses. Operationally seems sound, just a little iffy as far as some of his throws, but numbers back it up. I mean, and it's not just this season. I mean, he's got a pretty steady resume already.
Yeah, just very efficient, and for the most part, he's not going to put you in this position to lose, and he's going to do just enough for you to win. And that's kind of how he's operated through his time here. But like I said, guys, Trey Lance makes it weird, because if Trey Lance, like, not knowing what's going on with Trey Lance, I think the Cowboys could draft a quarterback in the later rounds. In consideration of, and again, I ain't even gonna hold you. I'm a Dak Prescott person. He's my quarterback. He's the first one that I was able to watch from college to now, so I know his game. But there are some concerns about, I'm sure the people do have some concerns about some of these major injuries he have had. I think it'll tell us a lot if the Cowboys decide to just bring Cooper Rush back or draft a guy, possibly.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that maybe the Cooper Rush situation gets tied to Mike McCarthy. The fact that he's been there, and been in that system, knows the organization so well. That's, to me, that's added reason where if you're going to keep the same coaching staffs, keep the same system and all that, it would make sense to keep Cooper Rush there, because it is the safe move. But sometimes with your backup, that's the best move, is to be safe.
Yes.
Because trust is really the key word there. And you can trust him to come in should anything happen to Dak. I don't think that trust is there right now with Trey Lance, because like you said, they don't really know what to expect at this point. Iisha, we got to run. Awesome insight, though. We greatly appreciate it. And thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, guys.
All right, there she is. Iisha Morrison does a great job. Go follow her. Go follow all their work. DLLS, especially, with the Cowboys staying somewhat relevant here in the final weeks of the season, despite officially being eliminated yesterday from the playoffs. All right, real quick, I wanted to touch on this before we get out of here. The Christmas slate of games. Netflix is where you're going to have to go for these games on Wednesday, starting at 1:00 Eastern, and then followed by a 4:30 game. So you get Chiefs, Steelers in the early game, and then Ravens, Texans. These are the same 4 teams that played on Saturday, which allows them to turn around and play Wednesday. It's the same equivalent as going from Sunday to Thursday, which the Bears and Seahawks will be doing. So you got plenty of games this weekend. There's no question about it. There's, I think, roughly 920 people on the Netflix broadcast team is what I saw on the graphic. They've hired everybody except for you and me, Bo. Everybody except for the two of us are on the Netflix coverage.
They were just handing out invites to do their coverage, and yeah, you're right. Ours was kind of lost in the mail. It's the Netflix NFL Avengers. That's what I always thought. It's like they're gonna rally together and cover these 2 games. I'm excited. I mean, it's why I pay however godly amount now I pay for Netflix. I'll be able to just fire it up on streaming and not have to worry about it. And the NFL continues to just kind of big brother the poor NBA, who Christmas used to be their day. Now the NFL is like, nah, you know what? You guys had a decent run, and we're just going to lay claim to it now.
Yeah, they've just completely taken over that. And to that point, like, I'm assuming the NBA still has a ton of games on Wednesday, but I have no idea.
5 or 6 games on that same day.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what games they are. I could probably guess some of the teams because they always seem to be the same teams. But Chiefs need a win to keep pace with the 1 seed, and then it's a good slate of games. You get 4 teams that all look like they're headed to the playoffs. Texans got to win in the late one, and then you got the Steelers and Ravens. The AFC North title is up for grab. They're not playing each other, but they both need to win their individual games to keep that going. So I can't hate on it. I'm certainly not upset that there's football on Christmas Day. I'm not one of those people. I'll watch football on Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever day you want to put the game, I'll probably watch it. I'm definitely part of the problem in that regard, but I don't apologize.
No, never. I would take that over, having what else are you gonna do after you open presents? So yeah, just fire up the NFL and I'm not gonna complain about that. There's a game on something we didn't get to talk about because it was Saturday. We were mostly focused on the Sunday results. The Tank Dell injury, brutal blow for the Texans.
Yeah.
Not only was it, grotesque, it was poor. It was just one of those kind of don't look away if you're squeamish. But that's one of those injuries that's going to bleed potentially into next season. And they've got so many important games to go. And CJ Stroud was completely shaken up by that. I don't know if he ever kind of found it again. And they got that big game against the Ravens, who have kind of found themselves. Are you looking at any of these games? Because you got the Chiefs 3-point favorites on the road. And then you got the Ravens as 5-point favorites on the road as well. So a couple home dogs. Anybody going to be able to kind of surprise us?
I mean, it wouldn't shock me if the Texans are still a good team. And that's, remember they had the Lions on the ropes there. They should have been able to put that game away, and they just couldn't. So wouldn't shock me at all if the Texans win that game, or at least cover. Steelers seem to be heading in the wrong direction. I don't know if this is the right time to play the Chiefs, but
they need Pickens back big time.
Yeah, they do. And then let's not forget, I mean, this is the equivalent to a Thursday game. Things can get crazy, and they're both day games. It's not like usually you play Thursday night, right? Like you're moving that up earlier in the day too, so the turnaround is a little bit tighter. So I don't know that you can rule anything out with these two games, but I do think it's 4 good teams, and I'm looking forward to it. That's going to do it for us, though, Bo. We got to get out of here, and appreciate everybody watching, listening, however you're consuming the show. We'll be back next week. I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a great week out there. Enjoy the football. There's a ton of football to be consumed, and a lot on the line, too. So we'll be back next Monday to wrap it all up and recap everything that happens in Week 17. We'll talk to you then.
We all silly like the mayor.